I was privileged enough to be able to go to therapy from a really young age, but I would go to therapy and just basically lie and not tell the therapist anything and just be like, I would say things that sounded like maybe I was getting something under the surface, but the truth was I had all this like insecurity and pain, and I just didn't want to talk about it because I was scared of being weak and scared of being vulnerable. And so a couple years ago, I reached a real breaking point in my mental health, and I started going to therapy and just being honest. I said basically, screw it. I might as well just tell the truth. And I actually started to feel happier and feel like this weight was lifted off of me. But it kind of created this contrast where I looked at myself as a young person and thought about all the time I wasted lying and not being honest about how I felt. And the people on the radio listening can't hear this, but there's an audience here. So I do want to say I feel like I'm obligated to say that even the happiest person in this audience should go to therapy if you can. It could save your life and fix your relationships and make you a better person. So I recommend therapy to everybody. Y'all need therapy, all right?
You kind of touched on this a few moments ago, and there were two things that I took out of it. One was you mentioned that you weren't being honest with your therapist. Was it part of it maybe feeling like you had to put on some sort of performance for the therapist?
I think I was performing my entire childhood. I think I was performing as someone who was like comfortable and funny and exciting to talk to, and I really felt like awful inside a lot of my childhood. I felt like really insecure and alone, and I had depression and I didn't know what it was yet, so I just thought that I was something wrong with me, and so I felt like I couldn't admit those things to myself because it would mean that I would have to reevaluate who I was and who I presented myself to be for my whole life. And so, the therapist represented a real threat to this image I was trying to withhold. And so I think I talked about vulnerability at a surface level way so that I didn't have to explore the truth that might have been. I have a lot of work to do and a lot of humanity in me that I'd have to understand. And I think talking to the therapist about those things, represented a threat to my identity. And so, it was a performance in a lot of ways, and I feel like I was performing in lots of different ways in my life. So therapy was just another extension of that.
The other thing that I read, and forgive me, I forget who conducted the interview, but I thought it was really an interesting discussion in that part of the problem for you was we circle back to the small town and literally finding help, and they would be people that knew who you were, or you went to school with their kids, and that became a whole other issue, right?
Oh, yeah. Rural therapy is really tough, because you kind of have what you have. And a lot of the therapists I had were awful. And they were people who didn't think my problems were big enough or had their kids who went to school with me, and they're like, yeah, well, you go to Hanover, so your life is fine, or I think people didn't recognize my problems as problems. I grew up in a nice area. I'm really grateful for that. And I think some of the therapists felt like that was a cure-all for any pain, which isn't true. As we all know, our suffering is our suffering. It doesn't matter where you come from. Pain is pain. Therapists that would tell me, I see you're playing the Ryman next month. Like, how could you be sad?
That's unbelievable.
Crazy,
given their background.
It's horrible.
Strange.
Yeah, and so I would leave and I'd be like, I'm never going back to therapy. And I already wasn't really doing it the right way. So I'm like, I just don't need this in my life. And it wasn't until I looked elsewhere to more professional people where I realized that it's a really great tool that really changed my life. So there needs to be some kind of refurbishing of the rural therapists in my hometown, and they could be doing a lot better.
Well, I think part of it, and we appreciate you speaking out about it, it's just educating yourself on just the process, because it's intimidating enough, but then when you have to go find the right person, it's sort of like dating, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be so honest with somebody, and they can't say anything about it, but you still have to be honest, and it's really hard to just speak those words to somebody, and finding the right person is so important. But also trusting that they're there for your best interest. I don't want to let my story scare people from going and seeing therapists or being honest with a therapist, because I think it's a really brave and important choice you can make, and I think you should try to make it and try to trust that these people have your best interest in mind.
So thank you for the fascinating discussion and the beautiful music. You're going to play the title song, and then we'll turn you loose.
Yeah, thank you so much for the questions. I hope that I really appreciate talking about these things. It's important for people to hear.
Well, I learned from you. We all learn from each other. Got to lean on each other, especially these days.
Speaking of depression, here is a sad little song about the most depressing time of year in Vermont, stick season. It is the time between, Halloween and the first snow. all the leaves are off the trees. It's just super disgusting and shitty. I can't really describe it to you. I don't know. Just go like look at a dumpster, and that's kind of how it feels.
Hey, we're in Ohio. We know exactly what you're talking about.
I wasn't gonna say it.